I spoke to OSCE Secretary General Lamberto Zannier at the World Humanitarian Summit in Istanbul and asked him if the organization was facing a crisis of relevance.
I'm not sure it's a crisis of relevance. There's a crisis inside the organization because of geopolitics, because it's more difficult to engage in this environment. But at the same time, exactly because of geopolitics, we found a space that nobody else in Europe managed to find. That is the room created by the fact of being inclusive, by having everybody around the table. And so, regardless of the profile of the organization, we are very busy doing a number of things which I think at this time are useful.
You work quietly.
We work quietly. That's part of what we do. We tend to work to prevent conflicts, and the very notion of preventing conflicts requires quiet engagement.
So where have you been successful? What have you prevented?
That's a question I get sometimes, and it's obviously very difficult to answer, because if you're successful, nothing happens, and it's very difficult to say, well, that was me. But I'm convinced that investing in preventing conflict, investing in tools that are there to stabilize societies, to prevent crises, is a good investment, especially today.
Whenever I do a Russia-Ukraine interview or program, I rely quite heavily on what your monitors have reported on, particularly in the East and the Donbass. The impression we get, despite the criticisms that come from the monitors, the impression we get is that the Russians can do whatever they like, and that the Russian-backed rebels in the east of Ukraine have a free rein.
When you look at what's happening in the East, we ourselves have difficulties. We would like to have more freedom of movement in Donbass. We often find obstacles. Our monitors are stopped at checkpoints. We had instances where the monitors were even taken hostage. And even one of our Russian monitors was held hostage by the rebels. Which raises questions: who is, controlling what exactly there? And there are a number of issues that come up. There is an internal Ukrainian issue, but there is also a question of Russia feeling responsibility for Russians abroad, as they say, and as Minister Lavrov put it in one of our meetings, our compatriots abroad. And so there is a sense of support of Russia for the rebels, and there are these humanitarian convoys going in. We have evidence of weapons and ammunition turning up all the time, and regardless of the destruction created by the conflict, which is a very deadly conflict. We have victims almost every day.
But you give the impression that it's 50-50. There's like two sides to this story, and we're not taking sides. Russia swallowed up Crimea, right? That's illegal according to all international norms.
Yes, of course.
You criticize that. I mean, this is not parity, right? It's not 50-50, is it?
We did criticize it. The issue is that the conflict in and around Ukraine brought up the larger issues that are dividing Europe today. Yes, this is about Russia and Ukraine, and Crimea has been condemned, and we're trying to find ways ahead on Donbass. But if we look at what we call in the OSCE jargon the protracted conflicts, and whether it's Transnistria, Abkhazia, South Ossetia, there is a larger problem. And the larger problem is the solidity of the Cold War outcomes, in a way. The relationship between Russia and the former Soviet space, but also, and more importantly, the relationship between Russia and the Euro-Atlantic institutions and the expansion of them. And perhaps the insufficient degree to which there has been a process of, a consultation, trying to keep Russia on board while expanding these institutions.
Is Russia in an expansionist phase? When we see the buzzing of the jets in the Baltics, we see Russia's involvement in Syria, we see Russia's involvement in Ukraine. As the Euro-Atlantic institutions are expanding, is Russia in an expansionist and perhaps imperialist phase?
What we are seeing is that Russia now is investing a lot in promoting processes of integration around Russia, and including Central Asia, the Caucasus countries. And obviously we are in a process where we are setting up opposite blocks somehow and potentially creating new divisions. That's what we want to avoid.
New Cold War?
I wouldn't say it's a new Cold War for a number of reasons, and we are not at that stage, but on some parts of the agenda there is confrontation, and on some issues the language reminds us of the Cold War agenda. But then we have broader challenges, and dealing with terrorism, for example, where everybody converges. We adopted recently in Vienna a decision on cybersecurity.
Given that you guys work quietly and you try to prevent fires breaking out, the migrant crisis, is that a threat to European security, European integration?
Well, it may become if it's not managed properly. I think we need to look at the global agenda. We are seeing the beginning of a demographic crisis. We see the impact of climate change. Of course, conflict is a primary source, but the role of organized crime, and we need to step up fighting against people traffickers. So there is a really broader agenda within which we need to put the migration crisis.
The Austrian far-right politician, representing a party that was founded by Nazis post-World War II, was an inch away from the presidency. Were you guys at the OSCE freaking out when you saw how close it was?
What is of concern is the reaction of the people to some of the security problems we have, and the radicalization within the societies. I think first of all we need to work within our societies to help people understand that world is changing. Societies are becoming more complex, more multicultural, and people have to adjust to that. They can't just react negatively, because this will create even more tensions. So we need policies where we manage the flows of migrants and we manage the flows of people who will contribute to changing our policies, but we need also to look at integration policies, effective integration policies, including more accent on education, but also including preparing the public opinion. If we don't do that, then there will be fear, there will be radicalization, and there will be conflict within our societies.
Next month, the United Kingdom might cut itself off from Europe. Is that good or bad for you?
I think we need a stronger Europe in this moment. So if the UK leaves, this will weaken the European Union, and I think the UK has a strong role in also contributing to EU policies. And sometimes it sees itself as a victim of EU policies, or some in the UK see that. I think it would be important to turn this around and to make sure that the UK becomes a positive force within the EU, and from my perspective also within the OSCE. I would like to see also the UK more active in the OSCE on these issues.
Secretary General Lamberto Zannier, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.